There was a belief that a woman who couldn't have children after 3 years of marriage was useless. This idea is out of touch with modern society. It's a backward way of thinking. Sadly, there are still those who carry the assumption that all women can and will become pregnant and give birth. And there are those who label women who can't as useless. My name is Ashley. I'm a 25-year-old housewife. I am unable to conceive. I have been weak and sickly since childhood with little physical strength. I often missed school. I didn't play with friends much, so I was shy. I had pale skin, was very thin, and didn't talk much. My parents considered me a defective product and despised me. They wished I would die sooner because I was a burden. All their love went to my older sister, Emily, who was 1 year older than me. Emily was healthy, unlike me. She had beautiful rosy cheeks and big, lovely eyes. I also had big eyes, but my thinness made them look sickly. My wealthy parents focused all their attention on pampering Emily. They bought her anything she wanted. I was left behind on family trips due to my illness. Hired housekeepers and nurses mechanically took care of me. I wasn't considered part of the family, so I never received souvenirs. Being treated as defective by my family was hell. I had no friends to talk to and I was lonely. My parents wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible. When I became an adult, they quickly married me off. My parents gave a large sum of money to my husband, Kevin. It was compensation for taking care of a weak, infertile, and defective person like me. Kevin, who was in financial trouble, married me for the substantial financial support. I was a full-time housewife. I was unsure whether Kevin was working or just having fun. However, he always came home late and drunk. Our marriage was based on money from the start, so Kevin never had any affection for me. Be grateful that someone like you, who's useless, even got married. I was repeatedly told the same thing as my parents, that I was useless because I couldn't have children. I still couldn't get pregnant after several years of marriage. However, there was one thing that saved me after getting married. Although Kevin treated me coldly, my father-in-law and brother-in-law and his wife were kind to me. My father-in-law, who'd known me since I married his son at age 20, treated me like his own daughter. My brother-in-law Mike and his wife Maria cared about me, especially Maria, who was worried about me. Ashley, you don't need to be like a doll and do whatever people say. Mike works for a big company and Maria also has a job. She even runs her own interior design office. She's a cheerful and wonderful woman. Maria is also very caring. Knowing that I spent most of my days alone and lonely, she came to check on me. At first, we just had tea and chatted. But eventually, she started teaching me various things. Try to get a qualification in something, even if it's just a hobby, she advised me. I told her it was impossible because I hadn't gone to school enough. Seeing that I was down, only able to do basic housework, Maria said, "If you can do basic housework, you can do most things. Learning something new builds confidence." At Maria's suggestion, I started studying for a color certification. I later learned that my father-in-law had consulted with Mike and Maria about me. Ashley tends to underestimate herself. "I wish there was a way to boost her confidence," my father-in-law said. "Introducing her to new areas of study could help," Maria suggested. Mike and my father-in-law agreed with her suggestion. Although my parents used to say that I was weak and slow-witted, I found studying enjoyable. I gained a bit of confidence when I passed a certification exam while studying during my free time. I was happy because I had always thought I couldn't do anything. I wanted to study more and aim for higher levels. However, when I told Kevin, he just scoffed at me. Must be nice to be able to waste time on useless studying. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by his words. Instead, I felt angry. I finally let out the dark feelings I had kept inside. Are those the words something an unemployed person who relies on money from his wife's family should say? Kevin was taken aback by my sarcasm, as I had always been submissive. He got angry at being confronted with the truth. "Shut up. I'm different from a defective product like you. I'm going to make it big," he shouted. I didn't hold back in my response. "You know, they call people like you big mouths." Furious at my defiance, Kevin kicked the wall and stormed out of the room. He probably went out to drink and have fun to blow off some steam. I understood that my parents wanted to get rid of their troublesome daughter, but I wish they had chosen a better partner for me. However, if they had that kind of mentality, they wouldn't have neglected their weak daughter in the first place. Marrying Kevin was a mistake. I ended up married to a loser who used the money from my family to play around. But ironically, it was Kevin's family that broadened my narrow perspective. After that incident, Kevin didn't come home for several days. I knew he was with my sister Emily, but I didn't do anything about it. Emily had divorced her husband and given up custody of her child. My parents still doted on her. That's why they allowed Kevin and Emily's affair to continue. I could clearly see the intentions of my parents, Emily and Kevin. They were probably planning for Kevin to divorce me if Emily got pregnant. My parents would have preferred to fulfill Emily's wishes over caring about me. I knew that one day my sister would steal my husband. I prepared myself for that day, now confident that I could handle it. Sometime later, we all gathered at my father-in-law's house. I regularly visited him, but Kevin hadn't been to his family home in a while. Kevin had a lot of pride and compared himself to his brother. Mike had graduated from a prestigious university and worked for a large company while Kevin was unemployed. Neither my father-in-law nor Mike had ever pointed this out, but Kevin felt inferior on his own. He hadn't done anything about it himself. He took pride in marrying me, a woman from a wealthy family, but my father-in-law didn't care. My father-in-law doted on me, his daughter-in-law, but was strict with Kevin. Kevin constantly praised Maria, Mike's wife, for being excellent. Deep down, he was jealous that his brother had a beautiful and intelligent wife. "Maria is amazing. She's successful at work, has children, and is a capable woman. Ashley is just stupid and can't do anything," he said with transparent flattery toward Maria and insults toward me. Maria looked annoyed by his words, but she calmly dismissed Kevin's remarks. "Ashley is my sister too. I don't find it amusing when my sister is insulted," Marie replied. Mike nodded in agreement. "Kevin, think about yourself before comparing Maria and Ashley," Mike warned. Kevin clicked his tongue dismissively. I felt embarrassed by Kevin's childish behavior. I understood that he felt inferior to his successful brother, but he needed to grow up. My father-in-law looked at Kevin with bitterness. He had treated them equally, but the siblings had turned out so differently. He had sighed about it to me. But today, my father-in-law cleared his throat and scolded Kevin. "Aren't you ashamed, Kevin? Relying on Ashley's family money and not working? Ashley is a good wife. If you're a husband, support yourself. Don't you understand something so simple?" Kevin's face turned red with anger. "Dad, Ashley was useless and dumped on me. That's why I'm just returning the favor," he retorted. Mike answered on behalf of his father. "Kevin, I don't want to say this as your brother, but your mind is rotten." Usually calm, Mike's sharp words made Kevin curse and storm out. As I tried to stop him, my father-in-law held me back. "I'm sorry, Ashley. I hoped he would become more responsible after getting married, but it seems that's not the case." With their shoulders slumped, Mike and Maria sighed beside my father-in-law. As I quietly bowed my head and tried to leave, Maria stopped me. "Don't worry, Ashley. Everything is prepared." I nodded and left my father-in-law's house, returning to the chaotic home where Kevin was raging. The room was a mess, destroyed by Kevin in a fit of anger. As I stared in disbelief at his childish actions, the drunk Kevin raised his voice. "I'm divorcing you, the infertile one. I'm going to marry your sister." Kevin laughed, bragging that my parents had already given their consent. So Kevin chose Emily after all, I thought. My parents had always given Emily everything she wanted. Even if it was my husband, they didn't mind. Kevin knew I couldn't have children when he married me. It was convenient for him to use me as a wife. However, Emily wanted Kevin, and my parents condoned their affair. They probably wanted grandchildren now. So they would use Emily's pregnancy as an opportunity for her to marry Kevin. It was something my parents were capable of doing. When Emily divorced before, she gave up custody of her child, saying the child wasn't cute because they weren't attached to her. Emily was the type who loved herself more than her own child. I felt sorry for the child Emily and Kevin would have. Would a child born to such selfish parents be happy, I wondered. Kevin, not understanding my concerns, mocked me, telling me to leave because we were divorcing. "I'll pay you alimony, you good-for-nothing." The shameless man didn't even realize that my parents would be the ones providing alimony. I signed the divorce papers, took my essentials, and left the house. Instead of going to my parents' house, I sought refuge at Mike and Maria's. I had been consulting with them about my suspicions about Kevin and Emily's affair. Mike said with a gloomy face, "I wouldn't put it past Kevin." That's when Maria started preparing for the worst-case scenario. Mike and Maria had a young child. When I arrived at their house, their shy child peeked out for a moment before hiding again. He was a cute boy who resembled Maria. According to Mike, his son was extremely shy. Maria, Mike, and I discussed our plans for the future. Maria had already arranged a place for me to live. I would be staying in the company housing of Maria's interior design firm, and I was going to work at Maria's firm. I was anxious about whether I could work, having never worked before. However, Maria assured me with a smile, "Don't worry, Ashley, you can do it." Maria took care of me, and Mike handled the paperwork. I severed ties with my family after the divorce. Mike explained the situation to my former father-in-law and concluded, "Dad, we are cutting ties with Kevin too." My former father-in-law was disheartened but not surprised. He told me to come and visit as usual since Kevin was no longer related to us. That's how I officially divorced and became independent. I received alimony from Kevin and severance money from my parents. I returned the severance money without using a dime. I didn't want to use my parents' money ever again. I started working at Maria's interior design firm. At first, I learned the basics of the job from one of Maria's subordinates. His name was Stephen, a cheerful man around my age. He taught me in between his busy schedule and chatted with me casually. One morning, I was the first to arrive at the office and cleaned it, surprising Stephen. "Wow, the office is spotless." He happily helped me with the cleaning. When I apologized, he tilted his head, puzzled. "I've thought this before, but why do you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong? We're equals. We work together." This was the first time someone told me we were equals. I had always felt inferior because of my weak body and inability to get pregnant. I believed that I was burdening others by living. In reality, the capable Stephen should have been in a higher position. But he laughed it off and said that if we worked together, we were the same. I felt embarrassed by my own self-deprecation, realizing that there were such generous men out there. At that moment, Maria came to work a little early. She looked at Stephen and me, smiling. "Oh, Stephen, did you finally get close to Ashley?" Stephen turned bright red at Maria's words. I didn't understand what she meant until Maria whispered to me, Stephen wanted to talk to you alone and was waiting for a chance." Stephen blushed and said, "Director, we agreed you wouldn't say that," before leaving for the break room. Maria playfully slapped my shoulder as I stood there, dumbfounded. When I finally understood the situation and blushed, Maria said, "Stephen is such a good guy. It seems like he's liked you since you first came into the office. But I'm divorced and I have a flaw." Maria exchanged glances with Stephen, who had prepared a cafe latte for her. Then she patted my bowed head and confessed a shocking truth. The son Maria and Mike were raising wasn't their biological child. In fact, he was a child of Maria's relative. They had taken him in after his parents died in an accident, so he was essentially adopted. Maria and Mike prioritized raising the child who had lost his parents. My former father-in-law knew about it, but Kevin didn't. That's why I didn't know until now. Maria said while looking at Stephen and me, sipping her cafe latte, with a warm and gentle voice, "When our first son called us Dad and Mom, I cried. Having a biological child doesn't automatically make you a good parent. Even with blood ties, there are parents and children like me who ignore each other. But Maria and Mike's son chose his parents of his own accord. I thought that was far more precious than a forced family based on blood ties alone." I took a sip of the cafe latte Stephen had prepared for me. The warm and sweet scent gently relaxed my heart. About 3 years have passed since then. I married Stephen. We got married about a year after we started dating. When I apologized again for being unable to have children, he got upset with me. "You don't need to apologize, Ashley. Would you be happy if I knelt down and apologized for not being able to have children?" I shook my head and he laughed cheerfully. "It's just a minor issue. Don't bow your head for something you don't need to apologize for." He had no idea how much his words saved me. Even after remarrying, I kept in touch with Maria, Mike, and my former father-in-law. All 3 were happy for my successful marriage, and today we were on a short trip. It was a tourist spot that Maria had once told me was fun when she visited with her family. I was sitting in a chair, waiting for my husband. He said he needed to use the restroom, so I was resting at a nearby tea shop. Then suddenly, I heard a voice from behind. "Ashley?" It was Kevin, my ex-husband. Behind him was my sister, Emily. Emily was still beautiful, but her makeup had gotten heavier. "You're still so gloomy. Traveling alone after the divorce?" Since I hadn't told my parents about the remarriage, Emily thought I was single. As I ignored her, my husband returned. "Sorry, Ashley, the restroom was crowded." My husband looked puzzled at Kevin and Emily. He definitely wanted to ask, "Who are these people?" As I tried to ignore them and urged my husband to leave, Emily mocked me. "You found another man already? Even though you're incompetent and can't have kids." As Kevin tried to laugh along, my husband spoke up, looking displeased. "I am Ashley's husband, and her name is now Ashley Stevens. By the way, we do have a child." He patted my belly and Kevin turned pale. Emily sneered. "I bet the baby will be disabled." My husband replied in a cold voice. He was probably at the limit of his patience. "Ashley is currently pregnant with her second child. Her older daughter is 2 years old and healthy. Today, we left her with my parents." Kevin turned pale at my husband's words. I myself was shocked when I first got pregnant. I cried out to the doctor at the maternity clinic, told him I shouldn't be able to have children, but the doctor examined my body and declared I could get pregnant. I had been led to believe by my parents that I couldn't have children. I had taken their word for it since they had always said so. However, my body was actually able to conceive normally. When I told my husband about my pregnancy, he was overjoyed. During my marriage with Kevin, I never got pregnant. I wondered why, so I consulted with Maria. Then she sighed, shook her head, and formed a hypothesis. I never tested myself because of my parents' suggestions. Actually, my parents knew I could get pregnant. Kevin knew too and was using contraception. Maria hesitantly muttered to me, "Ashley, there's a possibility that your parents have been deceiving you all along. Probably they didn't want me to have children. They thought it would be a hassle if I, who was frail, gave birth to a child who had disabilities. So they instructed Kevin not to get me pregnant. I remarried and had a healthy baby girl with Stephen. My second child during pregnancy is a boy, and both mother and child are healthy. I had been burdened with an inexplicable sense of guilt due to my terrible parents' scheme. As my husband and I were about to leave, Emily pointed and smirked. I aborted Kevin's child. It was a failure. In other words, she aborted it due to the possibility of disabilities. Kevin desperately begged me, "Please give me one of your children. Otherwise, I'll be kicked out." Emily laughed maliciously. I was about to scream in anger, but my husband stopped me. He looked at Kevin and Emily with disgust and said, "Save your nonsense for when you're in a coffin, you piece of trash." He gave them a sharp glare, then urged me to leave while holding my hand. I also turned my back on Kevin and Emily, sending them a contemptuous look before walking away. I felt like I had seen something incredibly bad for their unborn child. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Caring for my 2-year-old daughter and infant son is difficult, but my husband helps me. As for my ex-husband, Kevin, he was eventually abandoned by Emily. My parents were also kicked out once they were no longer needed. According to my ex-father-in-law and Mike, Kevin is in debt and struggling financially. They turned him away when he came asking for help, dumbfounded by his situation. And my selfish parents and sister Emily also ruined themselves. After divorcing Kevin, Emily indulged in affairs with married men and ultimately met her downfall. She was sued multiple times by her lovers' wives and had to pay alimony. In the process, she gradually lost her fortune and credibility with those around her. Even my parents couldn't stop Emily. Finally, due to Emily's selfishness, they lost all of their assets. Moreover, foolish Emily borrowed money from a shady company and is now being chased by a huge debt. My parents and Emily are homeless, but it's not my concern. They are not my family. They are just blood-related strangers. My precious family consists of my kind husband and 2 beautiful children. It doesn't matter what happened to my parents, Emily and Kevin. As I changed my son's diaper, my husband played with my daughter, laughing. Seeing his smile, I truly felt grateful to have met him. I smiled while watching them, and my husband looked puzzled. "What's wrong, Ashley?" "I'm just so happy to be married to you, Stephen," he playfully replied while patting our daughter. "Well, you're Mrs. Stephen, too." His cheerful laughter made me and our children break into smiles as well.
My name is Emma, and I'm 38 years old. After graduating from college and working for another company, I took over the family sandwich shop, a legacy from my granddad's time. My dad, Robert, who was a second-generation owner, passed away last year after a long battle with illness. Nowadays, I keep the place going with help from our longtime employees. It's a daily grind. However, at the beginning of this year, my younger brother Noah and his wife suddenly said they want to move back into our parents' house. The reason? Noah's company hasn't been doing well. They've lost their housing allowance, and continuing to pay their rent for their apartment has become a struggle. On top of that, Olivia is currently 8 months pregnant, so they want to find a new home quickly to ease their worries. From my perspective, there's enough room for them to move in. However, to be honest, I'm not particularly fond of Olivia. Why? Well, when Dad fell ill, and I was swamped managing the shop and caregiving, I once asked for a little help. "Huh? But I've got my own job. I can't help with the shop or hospital visits. That's your job, Emma. You're the heir apparent, after all. Look, I get that you're busy, but I'm swamped too. I'm not asking for every day. Just help out at the shop on your days off. That way I can run to the hospital, pick up Dad's laundry, bring him some donuts, things like that. No way. No way. Even on my days off. I've got golf, socializing with colleagues. There's a lot going on. You probably don't get it, Emma, since you couldn't even stick with a regular job. Well, that may be true, but... Plus, I can't ask Olivia to do that kind of stuff. Why not? Olivia only works part-time 3 days a week, right? Couldn't she help out 1 day a week for Dad's sake? Nah, can't do. When we got married, Olivia's father-in-law and mother-in-law told me sternly, don't ever let Olivia work in a small store like that in the shopping district. I see. True, Olivia's in-laws have always looked down on us, saying things like, how could we let our sweet Olivia marry Noah, who's just a shop owner in a shopping district, ever since their marriage was decided. But the fact is, Olivia married into this family, so she should be considered a daughter to Dad as well. Is it really too much to ask for family help when Dad's health took a turn for the worse? Because of these exchanges, our longtime employees, part-timers, neighbors in the shopping district, and even childhood friends have been cold not to just Noah, but also to Olivia whenever she shows up at the shop. Hey, I parked near the shopping district's entrance, and the chairperson said to me, back for another free meal at Emma's, are you? What's with the snark? Seriously, how rude. Well, that's a given. This is Noah's parents' place. Doing that much for Noah won't bring about any misfortune. As Olivia said this angrily, laughter erupted from the kitchen among the employees, saying, then maybe Olivia should be the one to experience misfortune. Furious, Olivia and Noah stormed out, taking as many sandwiches and deli items as they could carry. It was hard to feel convinced when Noah later said he wanted to move in together. But unable to say no to a pregnant Olivia, we started living together, even though it didn't feel quite right. 3 months later, perhaps it was no surprise, but living with Noah and Olivia was an absolute disaster. Olivia, now at home all the time after quitting her job, used her first-time pregnancy struggles as an excuse to shove all the household chores onto me. Even though our home is above the store, with the second and third floors as living space, it didn't matter. During business hours, Olivia would demand, Hey Emma, I'm kind of thirsty. Could you run to the convenience store and get me some organic barley tea? It's almost lunchtime and we're pretty busy. Come on, it's not a big deal. It's not like you're doing anything important. Can't you wait a bit? Or take something from the fridge? I need it now. Noah drank from the bottle this morning, so now I can't drink it. I'm worried about germs for the baby. Well, why don't you come down to the store? We have various types of cold barley tea for sale. No way. Walking all the way down from the 3rd floor is too much for me. A pregnant woman? You wouldn't understand, Emma. You've never been pregnant or even married. Look, I may not have given birth, but you knew what you were getting into when you moved back in, right? Plus, we've got a home elevator installed when Mom got sick, so if stairs are a problem, you can use it. It's not just about that. I'm talking about your lack of consideration, Emma. Seriously, I'm worried about the future if you act like this now. In the end, frustrated by Olivia's complaints, I asked my part-time employee to cover for me, went to the convenience store to buy drinks, and delivered them to Noah and Olivia's space on the 3rd floor. Olivia kept finding reasons to summon me for various tasks, but as her due date approached, she went back to her parents' home. After returning home for the birth, Olivia gave birth safely. They said the boy weighed 110.07 ounces. However, I was told by Noah and Olivia to refrain from visiting because they didn't want people to find out that I'm the person who runs the sandwich shop. For the celebratory money, I was instructed to wire it to Noah's bank account. I was somewhat taken aback by their consistent behavior, but since I didn't want to get overly involved, I looked up the typical amount for a gift on the internet and transferred it to the designated bank account. 6 months had passed since Olivia returned from her parents' home. The first thing she said when she showed up in my living space on the second floor was to plop down on the sofa and blurt out, "So, when are you planning on leaving?" "What? Leave? This house? Me?" "Yes. Haven't you heard anything from Noah?" As she said this, Olivia glanced toward Noah, who hastily began to make excuses. "Well, it's just Emma is almost 40 and lonely, right? It's hard to tell her to move out on her own." "Ugh! Listen, being kind is one of Noah's good qualities, but you're a dad now. Act like it. Let me say this, Emma, are you aware that you're a woman still living in her childhood room?" "Living in a childhood room? A woman?" "Yeah, you've heard of it on the internet and TV, right? You're like one of those women who never left their childhood bedrooms and lives like some kind of monster. Dad's been gone for almost 3 years. Isn't it time you moved out of this house?" "But if I move out, then this house..." "Oh, are you worried about the sandwich shop downstairs? If so, no worries. We're shutting it down." "Shutting it down? Olivia, it's easy for you to say, but what about the employees and part-timers?" "Don't worry about that. I'll properly pay severance according to employment rules. Once Emma leaves, we're going to build a branch office for Olivia's dad's company here." "What? Olivia? Does even your parents-in-law know about this?" "It's more like establishing a branch for Dad's company here was a condition for them to approve of our marriage." After that, they went on saying things like, "Move out within a month. Hurry up and inform your suppliers, and take any dishes, furniture, or sentimental items from the store area with you." And then, perhaps sensing my silent anger, "Even if you resent us, trying to squeeze money out of us is pointless." "Yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. We'll cover the employees, but that's it." It was then that I made up my mind. "Fine, I'll move out as quickly as possible." Saying that, I headed downstairs to the shop to discuss what would come next. 3 weeks later, after an extremely busy 3 weeks, I decided to move on the weekend. The weather was perfect for moving. In addition, the bulky items I took from my parents' house were mainly sentimental keepsakes from my dad and personal belongings, along with pots and knives that had been used by my granddad, dad, and me over 3 generations, so I didn't hire professionals. I got by with the help of people from the local shopping district, former employees, and longtime friends. Most notably, there were muscular men mixed in with my friends who helped carry stuff. They were bankers with a branch in the shopping district, and members of a local baseball team who often frequented my shop. "Emma, anything fragile in here?" "Huh? Which one?" That box should be fine. It probably has my granddad's recipe book." "Wait, a recipe book? Isn't that really important? It'd be bad if it got mixed up with the other boxes." "You're right. I'll take it separately in a cab at the end." While we were chatting and moving boxes, Noah and Olivia came down from the 3rd floor. "Hey, you're not taking anything extra, are you?" "Extra stuff?" "You know, things that you could turn into cash while you're moving." "Things I could turn into cash? Makes sense. It's not like you could afford to hire movers today." "Stop being so critical. Everyone's here to help me out of the kindness of their heart." "Ooh, scary. Making useless excuses, huh?"
"Olivia, let's not make a big deal out of it. I took a look around the truck, and there's nothing of real value anyway. Let's just burn some incense to make sure she never comes back struggling financially again."
Sounds like a plan. Completely drained by their unfiltered insults, I let everyone hurry me along. We loaded all the boxes into the truck and left my parents' house. Several days later, a few days had passed since the move, and I was in a meeting when, just as I'd expected, I received a call from Noah and Olivia.
Emma, what's the meaning of this?
I'm in a meeting right now. What's so urgent? What's so urgent? Some guy just showed up at our house today and said, "This property has been acquired by our bank. Please vacate within 3 days." What's going on? Ah, that. Well, then you should do as the banker said.
Do as he said? Are you saying you sold the place without telling us?
It's my property, so what's wrong with selling it? Your property? This place belongs to Noah.
Oh, really? Why's that? What do you mean, why? Dad passed away, so naturally the inheritance goes to me, the son, right?
As Noah and Olivia loudly argue, I inform them that, legally, there's no difference in inheritance between a son and a daughter, so Noah and I would each get half.
Even if that's the case, half of it is still mine. How could you just go and...
Before he could finish. Well, the land and the building weren't Dad's to begin with, so the question of inheritance is moot. Upon hearing this, What? What are you saying? Don't tell me, Emma. Did you deceive Robert, your dad, and get him to transfer the property to you before he passed? And then Olivia starts shouting. My ears start to ache from the yelling, so I tell them I'll be there after my current meeting ends and hang up the phone. 2 hours later, after wrapping up my meeting, I head to my parents' house as promised. Joining me is the bank representative I was meeting with. All right, I'm here. So have you decided where you're moving to?
Why do we have to move out?
Exactly. Why is this happening? Oh, goodness. I hope that taking some time would help you all calm down and think clearly. Seems like that was wishful thinking. What did you say? Then explain it to us now. As Olivia, holding a child, continues to shout with conviction, I decide to spread out the documents I brought and explain things carefully. The land was inherited from my dad's father, my granddad. The building we're currently living in, which also serves as a shop, was rebuilt during my dad's time. Obviously, he couldn't pay for it all at once, so he took out a bank loan in his name to cover the costs. The loan wasn't easy to manage, but given that my mom had fallen ill and become less mobile at that time, Dad insisted on a home with an elevator. So you've followed me up to here, right? Yes, we get it. But how does this connect to selling the place? Well, Dad was making the loan payments faithfully, but about 10 years ago, a situation arose where he couldn't make the payments. What do you mean he couldn't make the payments? Global stock market crash, the resulting recession, and on top of that, Noah suddenly says he needs money for studying abroad. So Olivia starts yelling. Was it a lie when you said you got invited to study abroad because of your excellent grades? But I decided to ignore that and keep talking. Of course, Noah's academic excellence was all a lie. Flashy and showy, Noah started college, but kept failing classes until he dropped out. Not wanting to tarnish his reputation, he first enrolled in a language school overseas, then managed to slide his way into a local college there. Dad wanted to leave him to me, but Mom was soft on Noah, so she took the deed to the land and sold it. She sold it? Yes, luckily the head of the Merchants Association bought it, so we could continue living here just by paying market rate rent.
What about the building then?
After Mom sold the land, the money Noah needed was taken care of. However, in addition to the loan payments, Dad now had to pay rent for the land. Struggling financially, he considered selling the building and closing the shop. Seeing my dad like this, I couldn't stand it. I reached out to a gathering of young entrepreneurs in the area. They introduced me to a real estate-backed loan company, and I arranged a family sale contract with Dad.
Family sale contract? What's that?
That's when the bank representative who came with us chimed in on the conversation between me, Noah, and Olivia.
So, if you can't pay the mortgage, typically you'd lose your home, right? To avoid that, Emma has secured a loan from a real estate secured loan company for the remaining mortgage amount. She's buying this house from Robert with that money. Emma is buying this house from Dad? Exactly. The money Emma paid will be used by Robert to settle the debt with the bank he had the mortgage with. Then the house will be under Emma's name. This allows you all to keep living here and continue the business. But keep in mind, Emma will be the one paying off this loan from now on.
Right. So how I deal with this place is up to me. Got it? When I said I wanted to buy the house, Dad was initially against it, saying I was too young for such responsibility. But I convinced him, pointing out that being young meant I could take a longer mortgage term, reducing the monthly payments. I could use my savings from my time as an employee entirely for the down payment, and I'd move back into my parents' house to help out, so I'd have no more rent to worry about. In the end, the chairman of the Merchants Association, who became the landowner, also convinced Dad, which allowed us to continue the business. But now, with Dad gone, and Noah and Olivia making life difficult, I questioned my reasons for staying. I sought advice from both the bank that gave me the loan and the chairman who owns the land. It turns out that the chairman's grandchild wanted to open a clinic, so things fell into place quite smoothly. By the way, you do remember that I deposited Noah's $15,000 inheritance share directly into his bank account, right? Well, whether you remember or not, the matter is settled. This conversation is over. With that, I left the house, ignoring Noah and Olivia's commotion. What happened next? Noah and Olivia had been planning to eventually sell our parents' house to Olivia's dad and use that money to buy a high-rise condo for themselves. However, their plan failed spectacularly. Even Olivia's dad, who had been keen on acquiring our land, seemed to have ignored them. There was a reason Olivia's dad was so eager to get his hands on our land. Actually, not far from our neighborhood, past the local shopping district and close to the city's train station, construction has begun on 2 large high-rise apartment buildings. With a total of 397 units, the economic benefits for the local community are expected to be significant. While several developers have shown interest in the shopping district land, it's not easy for outsiders to join this tight-knit community. It seems that Noah and Olivia's relationship has soured quickly after this incident. They've decided to divorce, but are currently arguing over alimony and child support payments. I've received multiple calls from Noah asking to borrow money. But I firmly stated, a woman living in a kid's room doesn't have money to spare. I then left a text message for any future references and blocked all other means of communication with him. As for me, a banker I've gotten to know suggested that I start a food truck business. I now operate in the parking space of what used to be my shop, but is now a clinic, at events, and also serve corporate lunches through introductions from the bank. Not only have longtime customers started buying sandwiches, but the number of new customers has increased as well. I've even added a second food truck and employed some of my former workers. Plans are underway to focus on selling deli items in the evenings, targeting working moms. Inspired by the recipes left by my granddad and dad, I'm more motivated than ever to succeed.